morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome and thank you so very much for being with us, Mrs. Jackie Bailey and my co-host, co-pilot and dear friend, Benny Wallington. Well, actually, Benny Wallington is an enigma. I don't know how to describe Benny because there's no one else in my entire life of the tens of thousands of people I've worked with over the last 20 or 30 years who's like Benny. The thing about Benny also is that he's true to his core. And so is our guest today. It's actually rare. People who walk their talk, people who are absolutely congruent with who they are and the reason they are the way they are and why they serve the people that they do in such a magnificent way. So without further ado, we're about to have a conversation with a woman who knows in every cell in her body exactly what it is that the kiddies that she helps are going through. And so I'm going to hand it over to you, Benny, so we can do a formal introduction, but this is going to be one of those conversations that I trust you will enjoy and feel inspired by within a very, very short period of time.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for that beautiful introduction to both of us. Wasn't expecting that, but I'm really excited to speak with Jackie because I've listened to a few of Jackie's podcasts with Kim, who you're featuring as well. And really, really excited and grateful to be here with both of you beautiful women. And so here's a little bit of a rundown about Jackie. Don't tell anyone were the words which silenced the child Jackie Bailey was. When she finally broke the silence as an adult, her hidden value revealed itself. Jackie is the author of Self-Centered Leadership, Becoming Influential, Intentional and Exceptional, and a 2015 semi-finalist in the World Championship of Public Speaking, placing her in the top 98 speakers of 33,000 competitors. I have to learn a few things off you today, Jackie. Today, Jackie runs the Speak Feed Lead Public Speaking Studio in Redmond, Washington, USA, and is the founder and executive director of the Speak Feed Lead Project, a non-profit with a mission to empower children, teens, and adults with public speaking skills. Jackie also co-hosts that fantastic podcast, Life Mastery Radio, with Todd and Jackie, providing stages to amazing authors, speakers, coaches, and creatives. As the international conversation coach for kids, Jackie Bailey gets kids talking to their parents, making healthy relationships, and feeling confident and courageous to speak up and speak out. And of course, Jackie is also a Positive Prime author of the Speak with Power and Purpose session, which is an excellent session for children, teens, and families.
Thank you.
I actually just watched that session again, and serendipitously, the screen that stopped was, I'm prepared for the moment I'm needed. So I thought I'd let the universe decide. How about we step off with that? How did you first become prepared for the moment you needed after that initial "don't tell anyone" remark?
Wow, that is a big story. And I think what prepared me for what I'm doing today is the traumatic childhood I had. And I think that's the same with many people as they go through these traumatic experiences, and it either makes them or it breaks them. And for me, it made me. And I now, as Kim so eloquently and delightfully said, I am in a place now where I can understand what children feel like when they are silenced, when they are invisible, and when they are not understood. And that is how our youth feel today. In many ways, the pandemic only exacerbated that feeling. And even during the most abusive times of my life, which was for most of my childhood, I remember thinking, if I can make it through this, I'll be a strong person. And that was really the mantra that I kept repeating in my head, even to the point then when I began to break the silence of my abusive past. As an adult with small children, I continue to say that to myself. If I live through this period now where I'm speaking out about this and revealing these secrets and putting everything I had at risk right then, if I made it through, I would be a strong person. I could not see through the clouds at that time. I didn't see what my purpose was going to be. I didn't see how this was going to be something positive. But step by step and day after day and pain after pain, I just kept working through until I was at a point where my voice could really now inspire other people. And that's been part of my mission, and now helping children and youth to understand how their voice is needed in the world, it's valued in the world, and should be heard and is worthy of being heard. It was a lifelong process of preparation.
Jackie, tell me something. Do you think that you need to experience tragedy or trauma in order to be extraordinary? Or do you think you can be extraordinary without having a past where you turn the mess into a message?
I think the short answer to that is I don't think you can be extraordinary without having some extreme difficulties. Knowing that everything has its opposite. To really experience joy, you have to understand tragedy. To experience gratitude, you have to remember times when there was nothing to feel grateful for. And so, yes, I absolutely feel that that's where our inspiring stories come from, is that triumph over tragedy that we've all experienced somehow.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
I was rather blessed as a child, I have to say, very fortunate, very lucky, and certainly not traumatized with a big T in any way, shape, or form. And one would have looked at me and said, wow, what a privileged existence that she's been born into. And I had extraordinary opportunities internationally. Even as a child, we traveled as a family extensively all over the world, and pretty much in style. And I had to leave all of the big T to the last 10 years in particular. And who I've emerged as a result of that, even I find rather astonishing. And I know this is going to sound bizarre, but ravishing. I'm just a completely upgraded human being. Wow. And I get to hang out here with people like you two. Jackie, if there's one part of your message that you want really everybody to embody, what would that be?
I want every individual to know that their voice matters, that literally using their voice can save the life or change the life of another human being. That has been the case with me. And I've seen it on occasion after occasion where people have used their voice to inspire change in the way someone feels about themselves, inspire change in the way someone knows something or a new knowledge that has opened up to them. And I've seen that someone's voice can make you take action in ways that you wouldn't normally do. And my mission then is not only to help children, they are the most vulnerable in many ways, but to help everyone understand that their message needs to be heard because it will change someone.
Okay, but what if you're like shy? And what if you, even as an adult, you have such trepidation when you're trying to express yourself and others kind of talk over you, and then you have this narrative, you know, see, people won't listen to me, see, people don't want to listen to me, see, you know, like they then have this reinforcing proof that shows up. How do you help people like that? They've got this, I'm really introverted, or nobody actually wants to hear what I've got to say anyway.
Well, you just described my entire childhood. You know, I mean, that was when I was told, don't tell anyone, that changed who I was. It silenced me in such a way that I was afraid to speak up. In social situations, I never initiated conversation because I was afraid I was going to say something I wasn't supposed to say. I was going to tell something accidentally, and I was going to be in trouble for that. And what changed that for me is when there was another child in danger, facing the same fate that I'd had. And the decision for me was either I stay silent because that's what was comfortable to me at that time. Either I stay silent and hope for the best that that person, that child won't be hurt, or I have to risk. At that time, my risk was I was a married mother of 2 very small children, and no one knew about the abuse I'd suffered. And the risk was that if I revealed it, my husband may not want to be married to me anymore. Maybe they wouldn't believe my story and think I was crazy, and they'd take my kids away from me as well. But I couldn't face the possibility that this child, this baby girl who happened to be my niece, was going to be abused like I was. And so I had to, for the very first time, conjure up enough courage to finally say what had happened to me. And so it wasn't easy. It was a lot. It was very painful. It was extremely frightening. And so I would say to those people that are feeling that, well, no one listens to me anyway, I don't have anything important to say, it's dangerous for me to speak up. It might be, but there will come a time when if you listen to what's in your heart and you weigh the options as to, what are the risks and what are the possible outcomes for this that are going to be positive, using your voice will usually win out as in a positive way. And like I said, I literally saved the life of a little girl by speaking out, and our voices, our messages can do the same thing. And so it may be difficult, but that's part of that trauma. It's part of that challenge that we go through that is going to get us over the edge of courage, and facing that as a risk and moving forward is what's going to make you exceptional. And that's what my book talks about, that we need to move toward that level of exceptionality as a leader. And that's what does it, is facing the fear and making the right decision, doing it anyway.
Wow. So in that book, do you give people clues about how to develop courage?
Oh, yeah. In fact, the title of the book is Self-Centered Leadership, and SELF is an acronym for those 4 characteristics that will make you an exceptional leader. And I learned that through leading a large organization of 3,000 to 5,000 people or members, and helped the leaders and team members of this organization meet certain milestones. I learned those 4 characteristics that I had to put into play so that my leadership skills could empower other people and not just create more followers, but to develop leadership skills in other people. And those characteristics are sacrifice, they are empowerment, love, and friendship. That's self. And when you are a self-centered leader, that means when you center yourself on those 4 qualities, you will be influential, you'll be intentional, and you'll be exceptional. That's the title of the book.
Wow, I love it.
And courage, of course, comes into play with all of those in a different way.
Oh, this is one of those juicy, delicious, full, bursting with flavor fruits of a conversation, isn't it, Benny? This is your type of vibe.
Yeah, I can step off with the fruit. I'll segue with the fruit. But thank you for sharing your story, Jackie. Very appreciative, and also appreciative of all the listeners, I'm sure, who may have felt something similar or had someone they love going through something similar. So very appreciative. A mentor of mine once said to me, find where you felt the wound of the world and sit in that wound and make art. It was like one of the toughest things I'd ever heard. And I was like, what, you want me to dive deeper into that thing and see what comes out the other side, make some art? Anyway, it was some of the best advice I've ever gotten. And yeah, I think what you've done is really done that. You've made art, you've created, you've helped other people through what your, I guess you'd call a movement through your podcast and through your not-for-profit and through the teachings that you're doing. And there's something, and this is where the long segue, hey, Benny, with the fruit, I'm looking at speak, feed, lead over your shoulder, and I can see feed. And we've heard about speak, and I'd love to hear about feed. What's feed?
Yeah, good question. Feed is short for feedback. It's also related to feeding other people's spirits through our own words. At the Speak, Feed, Lead project, it's not only our name, but it is the 3 areas where we focus in our curriculum to help our children and the adult clients that we have to speak with power, to feed others in word and deed, and to lead with positive influence. And that is what our curriculum is based on. It is what we try to do at every session of our classes, every workshop we give. Those are the 3 areas that we want to empower people to live by, is to become powerful in your speech, and through action, through the words that you use, uplifting language, you feed the souls of others. And all of that combined is going to help you to be a leader, because you're going to be influencing people in positive ways simply by who you are and how you're inspiring them through your words and actions.
Yeah, it's magic. I love it. Is there someone that comes to mind who's really like taken hold of this ethos, and what's that transformation looked like?
Wow, we just had opportunity a couple of weeks ago for International Women's Day for 21 of our young female students to be for the first time on an international stage and speak on a summit called the Voices of Women Summit. And they were invited by the summit organizers. Well, they asked me if I thought I could put together a track of young women that would speak on this summit with 200 or so other women, adult women, who were going to be speaking. And I said, heck yeah. And so when I invited my students to take on this opportunity, a few of them were a little bit scared. I don't think I'm ready. I don't want to do that. But most of them said, this is my chance to talk about anything I want to. I mean, this is my chance to talk about something that's important to me. It's my chance to actually be heard by people around the world. And it's also this opportunity to be with a whole bunch of inspiring women that I would be a part of. Yes, I want to do that. And that, going back to that question you first asked me, is what has prepared you for the moment that you're needed? Well, our classes have prepared these 21 young women to be ready with a message that they could give to the world in a 20-minute period of time on this summit. And as an example, one of those girls who is already in college, she's 19, her name is Claire. She let us know that she was in the process of applying for an internship, and she had applied for it a year earlier and was turned down for it. And she was in the process of applying again for this internship this year in college. And she now was able to put on her application, I have spoken on an international stage, and here is a recording of my message. And she got into the internship just like that. And so again, when our voices are heard and we have opportunity, we're ready to share them when the world is listening, magical things happen. It is a superpower when we use our voice to speak out. And it was for Claire, and she got into this internship that she wanted to, simply because she took the opportunity to say yes at a time she was prepared to speak out.
I'm such a huge proponent of the school of thought that says the earlier you can help people to express themselves, the better. I was very, very well guided as a young woman, going to speech and drama classes at the local theatre and then becoming very active as one of the leaders of the debating in our, school area, in our region and so forth.
It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but do you know, the funny thing is I was terrified. And I always had this, I'm not smart enough. And so what's going to come out of my mouth is not going to either be shocking enough or entertaining enough. And who am I? Because there are people who are a lot more clever than me, and they're better read than me, and they've got better formulated opinions than me. And what I love about Positive Prime is that the more and more and more I watch sessions like yours, the more and more I actually come home to me and the fullness of me, and believing in the potential of me. And that actually now makes me the kind of speaker who is no longer terrified. And that was like this aha for me. I've always been an introvert who has a perfect facade that I perfected, that allowed me to go out there. So everybody assumed I was an extrovert, particularly socially, but absolutely not the case. But I used to actually panic inside, and now I no longer do. And I can speak to very large audiences. I wouldn't say yet that I'm all that comfortable in front of 50,000 people on the stage. However, Jackie, what you're also doing in the world for these people, how do we broaden that appeal so that everyone goes through your program? Like everyone on the planet goes through your program.
Well, when I first began teaching young kids, a lot of the parents were coming to me and saying, the problem I have with my kid is that he doesn't talk to me. Or when I ask him a question, he just goes, he grunts, or he uses one-word answers like fine or whatever, right? And so parents would say, is there something you can do to get my kid talking to me? And I realized that was the one thing that we were missing as far as a focus. And so we reworked our curriculum where our foundation first unit class is now on conversation skills. And I think every one of us needs to be better in conversation, because these devices have this constant barrier between us and the people that are right there, perhaps even in the same room with us. And they have caused this decrease in our ability to feel comfortable in social situations, even just talking to people. In fact, one of my students the other day was telling me how she had a pair of skis that needed to be tuned up, and she had to call a shop. She's about 15. She had to call a shop to ask about whether they could do this for her. And she said, this was the most frightening thing I'd ever had to do. Pick up a phone and call someone I didn't know and ask them a question. And this was before she had my classes, right? But she said, I had to sit with that for a few minutes and figure out, why is this so scary to me? And why is this so hard for me to do? And that kind of is an illustration of what a lot of us feel, is we have this fear of talking to people. And I think it's because we aren't sure what we have to contribute. We aren't sure what we have to say. And is it really that important? And so we've seen that now through starting with these conversation skills, we are teaching children how to address somebody appropriately. We're teaching them how to make eye contact with that person and make that person feel valued, recognized, and acknowledged. What kinds of questions do you ask someone that is going to invoke the response that you want? And then how do you actively listen with these two organs on the side of our heads that will help you to respond appropriately to the person you're talking to? And then, is it really a conversation about you, or should it be a conversation focused on the person you're talking to? And we teach them these very basic skills of how to have a conversation. What we're seeing is that it's creating these situations where they are making better friendships, healthier friendships with people. They have an increased amount of empathy for people because they recognize everyone they talk to, no matter who they are, old, young, in between, they have a story. There's something they can learn from this person. And so they begin to value all people and look for the story that they can learn about this person. It helps them to get better grades because they're no longer afraid to raise their hand if they're unsure about something or if they need clarification on something. Now they'll raise their hand knowing, yeah, it's just a question. Questions are good. Questions are part of conversation. And I know how to ask questions. And so they're getting better grades and they're talking more to their parents. And so it's changing the dynamic of the family, because what we've seen is that even if just the child changes and they feel more confident initiating conversations and asking questions and responding appropriately, the entire family becomes closer. It changes the entire dynamic. And so this is something we all need to practice. We all have lacked in that, especially during the pandemic when we were all locked away from each other. And Zoom meetings aren't the ideal situation. However, they've been a wonderful substitute because at least in real time, we can talk to people face to face. And so that is my answer to your question. It took me a long time to get there. That is, learning the basic skills of conversation is going to help us to be comfortable in all social situations and help us to understand ways that we can contribute to every conversation because we recognize how to make someone else feel the most important person in the room, like most important person in the room, and how to listen effectively to learn what we need to about these people. So networking has increased in my adult clients because they can talk to people now and know what kind of information to listen for. So I think that answers your question.
It does, Jackie. And the funny thing is you were saying, that these adults come to you. I literally immediately thought, oh, wow, there must be so many women who come to you and say, hey, how do I get my spouse? And I'm, of course, talking about men, so very heterosexual, so it's a very biased kind of conversation. But how do I get my husband to give me more than, what do you want? Do I have to? What happened today, baby? It was good.
Exactly. Exactly.
You're the men in your life. We know that Benny is not one of those kinds of people to his Jackie. Are you now, dear?
Try my best. We wrote a book on how to ask better questions. So Jackie told me early on in our conversation that my questions weren't very good and to try again, and it culminated in a book 4 years later. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I better ask better questions. I've got no excuse.
Well, let me tell you a funny story. Years ago, you'll probably remember John Gray wrote a book that was titled Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Do you remember this book? This came out in the 90s.
Oh.
Well, my husband and I, we'd been married, 10 years or so at that point, and our children were 8 and 6, something like that. And our oldest is a daughter, Holly, and our youngest is Corey. And we were reading this book together, my husband and I, because we recognized that we had some weaknesses in our conversation and communication skills. And so we were reading this book together, and we had come upon all this information that was talking about how women like to converse in certain ways and they need to be validated more than they need solutions, right? But that men are typically those that are going to solve problems. So they want to find out the problem from you so they can solve it, right? And how they want to be the solution guy, but the woman doesn't always need a solution. She just needs validation, and how this is causing this conflict. As we were reading about this, I said to my husband, you know, honey, we have both a Martian and a Venusian child in our home. Do you think these same rules apply to them, and that maybe we need to be talking differently to our daughter versus our son? And he'd agree that maybe we could try it. So we decided that the next opportunity we had, we would experiment with this and talk differently to our children based on whether they were a Martian or a Venusian. Well, not 5 minutes after he and I had this conversation, Holly, 8 years old, comes marching into the room we were in, just obviously upset, hands on her waist and face all grimaced up. Corey won't let me play the video game, right? It's my turn and he won't let me play. Now, before we had read that book and before we had decided we were going to experiment with this, we probably would have tried to solve Holly's problem. And we would have marched downstairs to where Corey was and say, why are you treating your sister so rudely? It's her turn to be on the video game. Let her have her time. Da, da, da. We would solve the problem, right? But because we had just had that conversation, my husband and I kind of gave each other this look like, do you know what I'm thinking? Yeah, I think you know what I'm thinking. So what do you think? So my husband took Holly by her cute little hand, and rather than solve her problem, he said, Corey can be kind of selfish sometimes, can't he? That must be very frustrating. Holly, her expression completely changed, and she looked back and forth at each of us. She stepped back and she said, what is wrong with you guys? She goes, you're actually listening to me. And that was huge, because we in real time learned that we were not very well communicating with our children up to that point. We were trying to be good parents, but we weren't listening to them in the way that they needed to be heard. And that was a huge lesson. And Holly, at that point, she didn't need to play the game. She just wanted us to understand that she was angry about it. That's all she wanted. And then all we needed to do was sit down with on the couch and just start chatting with her about school and other things. And she was perfectly fine. So that was a huge lesson for us, that each of us do need to figure out how to make the impact on other people more than how we can feel more important in ourselves. And so, Benny, that's awesome that you have written this book with your wife about how to ask better questions, because that's really what life is about, is having the curiosity enough about people and then asking them questions that will get you information about them and help you to love them and appreciate them more.
Love that. I love that articulation. I haven't asked that question yet, so we're still just dating. Maybe she'll slip that into the next iteration of the book to get me to hurry up. I'd love to chat a little bit about the positive conversations, and this plugs into positive prime as well, because I think on one of our last calls we were talking about how much negative news we're exposed to, and so positive prime's a beautiful tool for that. It's like you can get that sort of opposite effect. And with I guess conversations and people being scared to speak up, a lot of the time, especially in business, at school as well, probably right the way through, when you have to have a conversation with someone that's been put in the diary, immediately you go, it's like, oh. So my theory around this is, how can we have positive conversations scheduled if we're not having them already? And so it's not so much conflict resolution, but it's how, like you said before, how do we build empathy and rapport? And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what you think about considered positive conversations and how that fits in. And then also, if you want, riff on how you use positive prime within the context of an ecology of positivity.
Well, I will be happy to admit that I am not generally a positive person. I can blame it on my childhood. I can blame it on the fact that I had to survive every day. And I never even considered what my future might look like. A lot of kids will say, I always wanted to be this, or I dreamed I would be a ballerina or an astronaut or whatever. I never had those types of thoughts. I never had dreams about what I could be, because every day was just let's see if I can survive this. And so that shaped my thinking into a definite negative pattern. And as an adult, I have really been challenged with trying to change my mindset. And I struggle with it every day. And I found, since co-hosting with Todd Cuddeback with Life Mastery Radio, I have been privy to hear information from some fabulous people about mindset and how to change it this way, or try this exercise to do it this way. And so over the last 2-3 years, it has been top of mind to really work on changing all the negativity from my past and rewiring my brain to help me to think more positively. And in the practices that I have done, I have noticed very deep and meaningful changes to not only the way I think, but it affects how I feel, and it affects everybody around me. There have even been times when my husband has said, "What has happened to you? Because you seem to just be so positive." He says, "We're still having challenges, and yet you seem to be able to just let them slide off your back and not get angry or get worried. Just, I don't know what's happening with you, but I notice it." And that was huge for me, because I didn't realize I was making an impact on other people. So one of those things that I've learned about in the last year was positive prime. And when I first started using it myself, I began to notice how it became hypnotic in some regards. And I could soften my focus and watch a session by one of the many creators of those sessions at that time when I first began. And then I started thinking, I could use this with my students, because there were big projects we were having in class. And I thought, there were a couple of these sessions on success. Kim's is one of those, on success and having confidence. And so I started to show my students a positive prime on confidence or success prior to the completion of these big projects that we were working on. And just 3 minutes at the start of each of these classes. And I began to notice a huge shift in them, in that for the rest of the 90-minute class, after that initial 3 minutes, they were much more focused. They were more engaging with each other. They were kinder to each other, and they physically sat up a little bit taller. They spoke out a little bit louder. They were less often holding back and actually being brave enough to say something that they thought might even be controversial. And as I started to see that, I went, there's really something to this. It's not just working for me, but I can see it working for my students. And that's when I decided that I needed to create my own session using the affirmation and the statements that we use in our curriculum on a consistent basis, because this would not only be something we could use at the start of class, but then my students would have access to watch this and reiterate everything that they learn in class as well. And so that in itself has been a tremendous change in my curriculum. And so now at the start of every class, we watch either my session or other sessions, because there's so many fabulous ones out there. I don't want my students to just be limited to mine. And we'll change it up based on what we're going to be learning that day and what I feel the focus should be in their mindset. So even though I still think I'm more of a negative thought processing person, I have noticed a major shift, and where it gets easier to change the thoughts in my head, and realizing that I have control and power to do that has been huge. In fact, some of the ways that, besides positive prime, I'll do that if I'm not able to be in front of a computer and watch a positive prime session, I begin to just consider I'm sitting in front of a river and there's these leaves floating by on this river. And I start to imagine that those leaves are a thought. And I can watch that thought and then watch it go on by. I don't have to jump into the river and grab it. I don't have to sit and ponder about what color is that leaf and what does that mean to me or anything like that. I just say, hey, there's a thought. All right, I'm just going to let it drift on by. Not a big deal. I have control over what thoughts I put in my head. And Positive Prime has been so amazingly helpful as I continue making that process into a new way of thinking. So thank you, Kim and Benny, for all of your contributions to that. But I see it in myself, I see it in my students, and now I use it as well when I'm speaking professionally, if I'm on a summit or on a stage, or if I'm speaking to a group or giving a workshop. I always introduce a session of Positive Prime, and the audiences love it. And many times it brings tears to my eyes because I can feel their energy changing. I can feel it shifting into something of gratitude and love and joy, whereas they may have come at first and they were a little bit stressed out or worried about all the tasks they might have to do. I can feel their energy shift. And so it makes me a little verklempt as well. And we can feel that together. So thank you, Kim, so much for that. It's been an amazing process to go through.
I'm just drinking that in. Thank you. At the end of the day, it's actually you and your brilliance and your genius that recognizes what it is that you're seeing as well, right? So a lot of people might look at a Positive Prime session and think, oh, wow, that's just a bunch of pretty pictures and some words and it's just flashing by. I think those of us who have a much, more developed understanding of human potential and some of these other schools of thought, even around neuro-linguistic programming or kinesiology or generally positive psychology, I think that we actually see a Positive Prime session through a different lens. And I think we I know what's happening there and I know its value. I understand how this is actually impacting an audience's or the viewer's biochemistry. So thank you. You know, what I actually love about your particular session is that it's content that I think everybody on the planet needs to maybe even watch your session once every day for 30 days and see what starts to happen with the way that they might speak up in a meeting. Speaking with power and purpose is the presupposition for the self-fulfilling prophecy that you've actually considered what is the purpose of what it is that I'm saying, what is the outcome I'm actually hoping for, wishing for, or trying to create in this dialogue, exchange, conversation, and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Most people
absolutely.
aren't purposeful.
Yeah. I'll tell you too, what's so even much more powerful than watching a session is being able to customize it. In fact, and for those who may not know, I mean, you can add your own images to your Positive Prime account, and that whatever session you're watching, you can add those of your personal images to that. So not only are there wonderful images that are already there, but when you see, like when I see my grandchildren come up in a Positive Prime session, you know, how can my heart not be full? And I will tell you that I truly believe it has helped me to manifest a tremendous dream of mine. And this always sounds a little bit ridiculous when I say it, because people will go, well, duh, who doesn't want that? But over the last 3 or 4 years, I have felt very drawn to the Caribbean. All right. I have envisioned myself teaching kids in the islands. I have envisioned myself on a warm beach in the sun where I feel completely grounded. And I don't know why, but that feels like home to me. I've never lived on an island, but when I think of home, it's not where I grew up. It's not where I live now. It's on a sandy beach in the sun. That's home to me. And so over the last 5 years, I've been feeling like I've got to get to the Caribbean. There's something there I need to do. And so when I started uploading personal images to Positive Prime, I put in my own pictures that I'd already hung around my office of the Caribbean, beaches, homes there, different kinds of food from the Caribbean, people that, were from the Caribbean. And I put those into my positive prime. Well, I got to tell you, this past November, I went to the Caribbean. And then I went again in January. And it's because I think I manifested it through the positive prime. And now I've uploaded pictures from actually being in these places that I only dreamed of being. And so now when I watch Positive Prime and those images of me actually on a beach, actually on a cruise ship, actually eating some of those foods, it's all come full circle. And I don't know that it would have happened that quickly without Positive Prime. So that is just another byproduct that we often don't think about. And it's not just a mind shift, it's a manifestation shift as well. So I got to tell you how grateful I am for that.
Amen and hallelujah. And oh yeah, of course, I really, really, really get that. And I love hearing that. And I love that for everybody else who's listening to this conversation. Jackie, I think that some people don't even go to the trouble of really personalizing their Positive Prime sessions because they, in some way, shape or form, they've lost hope that what they truly desire will and can actually come about. And they don't know that if you almost don't focus on the how, and I would love to ask you this question, if you don't focus on the how and all you do is imagine yourself on that sandy beach, listening to the water lapping, seeing the palm trees swaying, enjoying, the flavors of the Caribbean, and you don't worry about how, you'll surprise yourself at the manifestation. So I need to ask you very specifically, did you know how, or did you just have faith that the how would show up?
No, I had no idea how I would get there. It was all just a blur to me, but I knew that it would happen. When I started really focusing on it, at night I would fall asleep with sounds of waves crashing on beaches, right? and envisioning myself there. Well, it was in January of 2021 when I was sitting in a conference, and one of the speakers was Captain Lou. I can't remember his last name now. He heads up marketers cruises, and he puts on these cruises for people that are in marketing or people that want to be part of a marketing network. And I was listening to this guy, and he was talking about how they were going to go on this annual marketers cruise that they'd gone 15 or 20 years. And it was a really great deal. And I didn't have the money at that time to do it, but I paid for it anyway. I put down money to go on this cruise that was almost a year away, right? It was in November. And my husband was sitting in the same room with me. And I said, honey, there's this cruise we could go on, and it would be amazing if we could do it. He's like, we don't have the finances to do that. And I said, well, it's only this much down. And if we really want to do this, because if we don't, this year is just going to be mud. We're going to have nothing to look forward to, and it's going to be horrible. We have to do this in order to make it happen. And he said, well, okay. So I did it. I had no idea that was going to happen. I didn't know the how. And then the same thing with the second cruise. My husband had been auditioning with Paul Revere and the Raiders. It's a band that's been around since the 60s. He's a full-time musician, and an opportunity came up a couple of years ago, and he'd auditioned for them, and he wasn't accepted, but an opportunity came up again. He auditioned, and by June, he was a member of Paul Revere and the Raiders. And you know what? Every January, they do a Concerts at Sea cruise. And they perform on the cruise. So here's another opportunity to go on a cruise in January. I would never have known to manifest that. So the Marketers Cruise, nothing I would have ever imagined. The Concerts at Sea cruise, again, never would have imagined, but those were the hows. I just didn't know that that's how it was going to happen. But just by concentrating on this is what I want, and I'll think about it every time I can, and I will manifest it. I'll look at pictures and I'll imagine myself there. It happened. It didn't matter how, it just happened.
Wow. Well, for those of you who are listening, as a Positive Prime subscriber, we actually have lots of resources for you, and we actually do explain the quantum physics and the science, the brain science, for how you actually have your brain locked in like a laser sharp focus to bringing about your desires, your wishes, your dreams, the goals, so that you can accomplish what you want with greater ease and speed and joy. And Jackie, I had no idea you're going to share that story. Gosh, it warms my heart. Congratulations. Because you know what else it says? Now you know you can manifest whatever it is that you want.
Yeah.
I
still argue with myself. But I know I have to remind myself, look at what I've done already.
And so turn the volume up, right? Upload a lot more photographs. Allow yourself to literally just burst forth with crazy ideas and see how they're going to show up, and allow yourself to just be delighted and surprised by that. I will tell you. No, anyway, I've got hundreds of these manifestation stories. I love living in the everyday experience, which is what it is now, of the serendipity, the synchronicity, the coincidence, the like, and it's almost like I live in this like magical dream, and I'm like, because I'm not nearly smart enough. I mean, I'm smart, but I'm not that smart. I'm resourceful, but I still don't have a silver spoon in my mouth, but remarkable beyond explanation occurrences are occurring. And the only explanation is we've planted the seeds as these visual illustrations, uploading our own personal photographs into a tool called a Positive Prime session that allows you to actually access, because it connects you to the quantum field. And every single time you see these images, it's like you watering those seeds and putting a little bit of a sprinkle on them. Yeah.
I'm a believer now. I haven't always been. Like I said, it's been a journey trying to change my way of thinking about things and go from that negative person to someone who could actually manifest 2 cruises in 3 months apart.
Okay, so directly after this, what I would love for you to do, and everybody else who's listening, I want you to get up and I want you to do a little dance in your kitchen or in your lounge room or as you're walking down the street, right? Benny does this fantastic like seaweed dance. It's one of our coaching pearls, don't you, Benny? I love Benny's seaweed dance. And you don't call it a seaweed dance, you call it something else wild.
That's it, seaweed dance. You got it. Simple.
Oh, okay, cool. So what I want you to do is I want you to dance in the celebration of the anticipation of who you're becoming and what you're going to be experiencing. Because the more that you can celebrate here and now, it's this belief, faith, and trust that you'll be dancing all the way to every other goal that you have, right? So allow yourself to savor. And the easiest way I know how to do it is to dance, because in the dancing you kind of think, oh, I'm a bit groovy, I'm a bit like, this makes me feel really uncomfortable because I'm not like cool, whatever is going on in your head. But the reality is that, Jackie, I hope that you just celebrate with wild abandonment after this call. I hope everybody else does. So excited for who you're becoming and what it is that you're going to be experiencing, because it is amazing. And if you embrace that, you'll accelerate the way that you manifest even more.
Absolutely. And then speak about it. Yeah.
Yes,
inspire
exactly.
others by sharing your story about what you've discovered and what it has meant to you and what you have now, because you changed the way that you think about it. Absolutely. We all have that inspiring message. I believe every single one of us should have our keynote speech in our back pocket and prepared to give to the world whenever we're needed. Just like, Benny started with that quote. One of the affirmations on my session is, I will be prepared for the time I'm needed. And we should have our speech ready for the time when we can give it, when that audience is there, whoever they are. And so we can manifest that as well. We can think to ourselves, I want to give a message to the world that will matter, a message to the world that will inspire change, love, gratitude, hope in everybody. I don't know how I'll do that. I don't know who my audience will be, but I want to be able to do that someday. And if you focus on that, it will happen. And I can help you.
There's my final point, or final question to you, Jackie, and touching on the dancing, touching on positive prime in the morning or before. What we're doing is preparing for that moment, and so getting yourself into that positive energetic state, so when the moment comes past, you're ready to take it. And with the help of yourself, Jackie, how can people get in that room with you and learn from you about how to become better speaker, and also how to, I love that, feed the soul and feed other people's souls, and then go on to lead?
Yeah, thank you. I think that the best leaders I know are those who can speak truth and can speak power. And therefore, if you want to be able to influence people positively, work on your vocal skills. Work on the message that you have to give to the world. So if you go to JackieBailey360.com, that is a basic website that is the hub for everything about me and everything about our programs and everything that you ever wanted to know about speaking. It's all there. And I can help adults to craft that keynote speech, even if you never want to be a speaker on stage. Knowing your story is going to inspire someone someday. And we have a very methodology, clear, cut and dry system for how we can help you find the experiences you've had, turn them to stories, and then develop a message out of all of that. We do this for college students all the time, or those that are applying to college, because they have to put together a personal essay or a personal video. And these young kids have no idea how magical the experiences of their lives have been and what they would have to offer anybody else. So it works for them, and it will work for you as well to come up with, what is your story? What could you inspire the world with? In fact, I asked my 9-year-old, he was 9 years old at the time, my oldest grandson, Sam, who's now almost 13. When he was 9 years old, I said, Sam, if everybody in the world came into your living room and they said, Sam, tell us something magical, what would you say to them? And he goes, well, first off, I'd tell them to get out of my living room. And then he said, secondly, I would tell them to get off the video games when they're home and talk to their family, spend time with their family. At 9 years old, he was that wise. And so that was his message at the time. And see how powerful that is at 9 years old. Imagine your story. Imagine what you can inspire the world with by one message of inspiration. So JackieBailey360.com, start there. We have programs starting all the time for kids. We have programs starting most of the time for adults. And what you'll come away with is knowing who you are and how you are. You'll learn your value system and what is most important to you and how to be congruent with who you are and what you're saying to an audience. I think Kim used that word earlier, was congruent. I like that word. And you'll come away with like 27 different experiences you've had in life that could become stories that you have to share with the world. 27, which helps you feel comfortable in any social situation where you might have opportunities to contribute to a conversation. You've got all these stories that you could talk about and share. So it's an empowering process. You'll also come away with knowing your soul's agenda. You'll know what your soul wants you to do in this world, which is pretty incredible because that keeps you grounded, keeps you on track, and puts you in the right places to say the right things. So that's what I can offer you, and I hope you will check that out and see if there's any way that we can empower your voice, your message, as well as your children. We work with kids as young as 10 and all the way up through adulthood. And we've got summer camps coming up that will be in person here in the US. So we'd love to have your child at one of those as well. Thank you, guys.
By the way, that's Jackie for Jackie, and Bailey is Bailey, JackieBailey360.com. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the whispers that asked you to speak up.
Yes, I appreciate those whispers. It was not easy. It was not easy to say what had happened to me, but it was important and necessary. So, as is your message to everyone, it's important and necessary.
Well, thank you both for an amazing conversation, and yeah, looking forward to the next one, and how our journeys continue to intertwine as we do this good work the world needs. So thank you.
Thank you, Benny. Have an awesome day for those of you for whom it's morning, and have an awesome evening with sweet dreams for those of you who are either viewing or listening and it's nighttime. We love you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.